serious problem, and the grand jury is a good place to start. And I also have another little sheet with different websites that you can go to. Very informative. Got to have a strong stomach, though. All right. We're going to start off with Jerry. I'm going to give him the floor.
I'd like to say that the example that you just heard from Fox is isolated, that it's somehow an outlier, and that maybe this doesn't happen very often. But when you start to find out about what's going on around this state and around the country, you realize very quickly that this is not the exception to the rule. This is an experience that we're seeing over and over again with families. When you start to understand and realize that the individuals that are really making decisions about who's going to remove your child, should somebody call in a report, you start to realize that, oh my goodness, what they're basing it on, in many cases, is simply speculation, a concern that I have, or maybe I heard something. Maybe a third party suggested something. It is, in fact, possible for someone to get a knock at about 11:30 from a stranger. They may have 1 or 2 police officers. You just put the kids to bed. You open the door. That stranger walks in, they have an identification, social worker. And you're kind of wondering, what's wrong? They have police with them. What's going on? Well, we got this referral and we got to talk about it. We're concerned about your kids. Well, they're okay, they're asleep. Well, we're going to need to wake them up because we're going to need to talk to them because there are things in this referral that say that there may be a concern or a problem with your kids. Yeah, but they're asleep. No, but we need to talk to them. And of course they have law enforcement, so you're wondering, well, I better not disagree, I better cooperate, because now you start to wonder, oh my goodness, things you may have heard from those other people that this happens to. Okay, well, they talk to your kids. Well, they're not saying a lot, but you know, these things in this report, we have real concern, and we've heard these things, and we're going to have to take the kids. You're going to do what? I'm sorry, we're going to have to take the kids. It's better not to resist, and we're going to let you know where they are in the morning. We'll give you a phone number. What do you mean you're taking my kids? And then before you know it, they're telling you to pack bags. Pack the bags of the kids. And they're walking out the door with your kids. And you're going, oh my God, what just happened? And you start calling around. They just took the kids. And you're trying to figure it out. What happened? What did I do? What? That's happening. That very scenario I've heard over and over again. And when you get to court, because you're supposed to go to court within 72 hours, and you arrive, and you kind of hear what someone has said, called allegations, in this thing called a petition, and you're thinking, who are they talking about? What do you mean that represents me and that's what I did? Who said so? I mean, who proved this? Who provided the evidence? But you know what? At that first hearing, all they need to have is that report that on the face of it, it looks reasonable. You know what? We're going to have to keep the kids in temporary custody, and we're going to set it for the next hearing. It'll be within 30 days. And we call the next one jurisdictional dispositional. We're going to discuss in more detail these concerns, because on the face of this report, I think there's a legitimate reason to hold the kids over. Maybe your kids have never even been to a sitter, but now they've been separated. Now they're not with you. And oh my God, what's going on? What do you mean I can see my child an hour over the next week if I cooperate? What do you mean you have a problem that I'm angry and upset? And don't show that you're angry and upset, because guess what happens if you show that when you're in court? I'm not sure we have a stable person here. Yeah. You're acting kind of irrational. I mean, I'm not sure you can handle kids. And then they do what we call in my profession, pathologizing your reaction. Oh my goodness, I guess there's a good reason why we took the kids. Because after all, look at how you're acting and reacting. Can you imagine if that parent didn't react that way? That will be used against you too oftentimes if you don't react. React, don't react. And by that time it's almost too late. Because now your kids are in the system. What a lot of people don't know is the reports that end up in court with regard to the removal of a child, on the bottom you'll see a name, and that in theory is the author. But that's not the person that decides what information goes into the report and what ends up in court. It'll be a supervisor, an administrator, a manager. Individuals that will never see you, never see your children, never see you interact with your children. In my book, I refer to them as the ghost authors, the phantom authors. The ones that are actually making the decision, that are deciding, well, we have these concerns after all, and based on my prior experience, I think we have a situation here. I'm not sure that caregiver, that parent is safe. But those individuals don't have to go to court, right? They send the social worker who signs the report, who represents it in court. Now, this just doesn't happen that first hearing, called the detention hearing. It happens at that next hearing. The one that happens in 30 days, the one that now is going to represent the facts and the truth. But guess what happens at that next hearing? In many cases, it's simply those concerns that were on that first report. It's simply that speculation. It could be a social worker that says, you know what? That parent has taken their kids to the doctor several times. I think they have Munchausen by proxy syndrome. For those of you that aren't aware, it's a rare condition, Munchausen by proxy syndrome. It's where a caretaker or parent, for reasons of attention, will fabricate or create symptoms in a child. And then they take them dozens and dozens of times. Well, the social worker may have heard or read a parent took their child 2 or 3 times. And they disagreed with the first finding, so they went for a second opinion, maybe a third. Oh my goodness, I think we have Munchausen. I'm going to add that to the list of concerns. Or maybe there was a driving under the influence, or a charge of being under the influence, maybe a couple of years ago. Okay, we've got a drug problem. We're going to add that to the list. So before long, in that next hearing, you could see that list of concerns kind of grow. Because sadly, the purpose isn't to really uncover and find out if there was any legitimate basis to those concerns, if there was any real evidence to support those concerns. The purpose of that next hearing is to make sure that they can sustain those allegations. Make sure they stick. Because the concern is, well, we want to make sure we look consistent in court and not foolish, because we did take children after all, and we did recommend, and we do have those original concerns. So that second hearing, that other report that's going to be more comprehensive and uncover the truth, is simply the sequel to the first report and the concerns. And the children are still separated. And the parents are still not sleeping. Because after all, the kids haven't even gone to sitters very much. And I'm seeing them once an hour. Probably in a 10 by 10 room with a chair and a desk. And somebody monitoring my visit. Because after all, there's concerns about me. There might be something wrong with me as a caretaker. And they're monitoring the visits. And I'm wondering, what's going on? How could this happen? In our system, in our dependency court system, in child protective services, the criteria that's actually required by court that's used oftentimes has little to do with evidence, little to do with proof. I've worked in the system, arguably the largest CPS agency in the world, Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services. They have an average of 35 to 40,000 children in foster placement, out-of-home placement. I've heard story after story for almost 2 decades of family members, of parents that say, what did I do? Maybe we had some issues, maybe we're having some problems, but that made me unfit, and it made it okay to remove the children or deny placement with the relatives. The story you heard about Fox, I've gotten to know over the last few days. I've had several conversations. I'm also a licensed clinician of many years. And if you had conversations with Fox, you'd ask yourself, why can't she have her grandchildren? What's wrong with her? Is she any different than you and I? This is an issue that isn't left of center or right of center. It's not a Republican issue, it's not a Democratic issue. If you get that knock at 11:30 and kids are removed, that pain and anguish won't care if you're left of center or right of center. It will feel the same. I once worked with a family. It was considered a high-profile family. There were 7 kids. One child died, and that's what brought it to the attention of CPS. It was the second of the youngest child. Well, they were concerned that maybe that child died at the hands of the father and his parents where they were living. So, of course, it was cross-reported to law enforcement, as is the case in policy protocol. Law enforcement went out, questioned the father, his parents, all the children. In fact, did it twice at the insistence of CPS, because they were sure that there was foul play, that something happened, that that father and his grandparents, for whatever reason, chose to kill this one child or allow the child to die. Well, after law enforcement did an exhaustive investigation twice, they couldn't do a whole lot. Law enforcement said, you know, nothing here. However, they kept that referral open on the family. 6 months later, they got the knock on the door from CPS, LA County. I'm sorry, we still have concerns. We're still not sure. A child died. We're going to have to remove the children. The rest of the children. Now, mind you, these children were in school, dental records were current, no medical issues or problems. They all had loving relationships with their father and grandparents, and all the kids were removed because some individuals that never met the children, never met the father before, never met the grandparents, decided, well, a child died, and I'm not so sure, we have concerns. All the children went into different foster homes because it's hard to find foster homes that can take 6 kids. There was a baby among the sibling set. Well, they decided, okay, a baby. Babies are adoptable. You know what? We're going to take the baby and put that child in a pre-adoptive home. Well, there wasn't one in the neighborhood. So they put it into a home that was actually about 65 miles away. But it was an FR case, family reunification case. Kids are supposed to have contact with father because, in theory, the goal is family reunification, put it back together again. But guess what they started to tell the young couple that had the baby in the pre-adoptive home? You know what? Father's never going to get the kid back. Father's always angry and pissed off. I think he's a misogynist. I think he has issue with women. And they kept that baby in that pre-adoptive home. And that young couple, we later discovered, couldn't have children. They were happy to have that baby. And they were getting close to that baby. They were taking the baby to family activities, kind of holding that baby out. At one point, they even decided to get a larger place